I know there's still some rights, and I mean, I want I asked because I have and then it's longer factors. We'll see. Right? Looking at campus. Oh, yeah, two types and work. Perfect. So, you know, I've got, oh my God, back in my step. Yes. Like, how much? Oh, gosh. That means time for the culture. Yeah. I don't think that. Just like,
For a paranormal panel. So it's like a while, then have you guys join us?
in charge.
Hey, brother. Say Becky and this is off.
See what happens. See what's hot. And the phone turns, maybe made out. And like, I'm trying to bring them up there.
The equipment, we'll be talking about um, some of the investigations I've gone in through the years, and then I will be doing a Q&A from the audience. You guys can join in. Anything that gets donated in this live is going to go towards Andy. So I appreciate any generosity people are able to make. It's a great organization up here. Um, so yeah, that's why we're here today. How's it going, Andrea? We got Facebook and YouTube over here, and TikTok over here.
Oh,
So we'll be starting at 7.
in our meeting.
We've been giving out a lot of news today.
We're normally not. Like, I just feel like it's yeah. Whether or not you're gonna choose to stay with that, right? So throw chocolate block just like when you have a hot text from you, when you have to take free. You're like, oh, you know, you're free.
I'm sure like I have a giant deck of cards.
Um, so like maybe a fashion on that and like offset during the throw.
Hey Becky, thank you for subscribing.
So is your partner very supportive of you and something? Also, maybe have some knowledge to me, but this Harry connection. One way to George. Here, I need the first. I'm here. Have you thought about leaving this person out? Yes, usually this person I feel like is even mom stressing like I just stressing out making them leaving comments so
If you're starting in 5 minutes, guys. If you're starting the payment in 5 minutes, guys.
so I don't like that person that will lower your organization. And they didn't sign your terms of response to your cabinet. One right where it's or you have what like this weeks. Not like property when I do it should
Ariel.
but you know
Yeah, absolutely. Gonna be doing a panel in like 5 minutes. I can show you the equipment though. Hope you don't mind. I'm live on my platforms and stuff. You're good. So yeah, I got all the different kinds of stuff, and yeah, feel free to take pictures and everything. I'll move my my drink and my keys. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's made in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, right next to Gettysburg. That's called it's a REM pod. And so basically what our belief is when you tell a spirit to come up and touch this is a regular REM pod. They may be kind of intimidated to come up and touch something like that because they don't know what it is. But when you have something that they might recognize, like this lantern, they might be more susceptible to come up and touch something that's more recognizable. So that just and then it has a no sound mode as well. It's a pretty cool piece. This is a music box. This is all motion censored. And then it plays music when something crosses in front of the beam. course, got to choose the creepy music. Night vision goggles. We have trail cameras, parabolic microphone. This is a new piece of equipment that we're using. So this crystal ball here, where what we do is we're gonna have a laser that comes over here, and as you can see, when it hits hit, it glows, right? But if something walks in front of it, it's gonna go dark. So in the pitch black with a laser, you're gonna only see the little bit of the laser. It's very small. It's got lines. But when it hits in here, it makes this illumination. When something crosses in front of it, this goes black. Yeah, it's a new piece that we're doing. So very excited. And these are dowsing rods. So dowsing rods have been used for 150 years. That's how you find like people like with witching sticks. So when you hold them up, they usually stay pretty even. They don't move. But if you ask if there's something here, can you cross these? If you ask, can you move them to the right for me? Out to the left.
I want to
Try to go. Yeah. So these have been to Waverly Hills Sanatorium, the Clown Motel, the Conjuring House, Lizzie Borden's. They've been all over the country to some of the most haunted locations. So yeah, absolutely. Would you like a signed picture?
Yes, Jeff.
Absolutely. You watch the show?
To be honest, no, Jeff.
No? Okay, that's okay. We're on YouTube. So right here, you can see that's our YouTube page, and you can watch the episodes right there.
Can I take a picture with you?
Absolutely.
Squeeze in here.
Yeah, ready?
Thank you.
Yep, not a problem.
I'm excited for your.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great show. Okay. Energy. I love this stuff. It's so good. Promise I'm not getting paid for advertisement with that.
So you live, are you introducing yourself to viewers or how does this happen?
We're already live.
Oh,
I've been live for about 10 minutes, so got people there. We've had 175 people in there.
okay.
Got a lot of people in there, so
So just that 12, just get up and introduce you to the people who are here.
it's 12 now.
Okay. Let me get everybody else here.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, how to pull in one thing that works and close tries. Or you get some your or the silence for it. Everybody else is so just yeah, sorry. So it was just like that. Yeah, you're totally have to. So your meditation on yourself, right? Wonderful, you know, no, sorry. Why things but I found doing tonight. Now and starting to repair, right? Yeah, ready to get myself next time. So everything was nurturing. I made right. Drawing. That's a great story. I know every parent. So me. And I choose not anything to me. I don't know what's the. I gotta keep my straight to the right. Yeah, line and we just not put like my name with like I for it was. And that was. You know what it is. Well. I feel safe. Most touch my time. Oh, like. I don't comments. Then you know this. Okay, I guess it's needed things. We're all faster, yeah, an hour, and then you can tell you need to like.
Our psychic therapy benefits the Thousand Islands area Habitat for Humanity. My name is Christine Darrow, and I am the chairman of fundraising. Over there at the front door is our wonderful executive director, Barb Perez. I know you guys are excited, so let's go ahead and introduce Jack Basie of SVD Explorers of the Unknown.
How's it going, everybody? So I'm originally from upstate New York. I'm from St. Lawrence County. I've been doing paranormal and cryptid investigations for 23 years. I work with a gentleman named Evan B. Stone, who is the cinematographer and filmmaker for not only our show, but shows like Ghost Nation, Finding Bigfoot, Expedition Unknown, and Expedition X. Um, he's got a bigger repertoire than me. He wish he could be here today, but he lives over in California. He will be coming up in June. So basically what I'm going to tell you about guys about today, this is my first time doing public speaking. So if you can tell I'm nervous spinning the marker up here, that's why. So yeah, 23 years of doing this, I've witnessed some really crazy stuff that I can't explain. Um, and being a paranormal investigator, it's good to be a believer, but it's also just as good to be a skeptic. That's the key thing about doing investigations is always go in with the expectations of not finding anything and then just being stories. And then when you go in, you conduct an investigation properly, then you can find out if the truth is actually there. I started when I was 13 years old, and the reason is because I had my first paranormal sighting when I was 8 years old. Um, it's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up to my window being tapped on, and I thought it was just my two older sisters playing a prank on me because that's what older sisters are on this earth for. And I opened the window and there was nothing out there. And I went back to sleep, and about 15, 20 minutes later, there was tapping on my window again and then scratching. I opened my window and I saw a shadow entity, is what we call it. It's about 7 feet tall, red eyes looking at me. I was terrified. I tried to scream and I couldn't scream. I tried to run and I couldn't run. All I could do was breathe. And I remember seeing my breath and being terrified and thought, 8 years old, thinking, I'm going to die. Like, this is it. The thing ended up coming towards me and touched my parents' house. And when it did, it puffed into black smoke and it was gone. And I ended up falling off the bed and ran and told my parents. And of course, an 8-year-old telling you a story like that, you get, oh, you had a bad dream. Um, about 5 years later, I had another experience with the same entity on the property. And this time, the answer I got from my father is, "There's evil that walks this earth that we will never fully understand." I'm not trying to quote Zach Bagans, I promise. But there's things that we'll never fully understand in this world. We really do live in the unknown. There is a lot of history in upstate New York. You have the French Indian War, War of 1812, but it goes back even further than that. And I grew up with my mother, who was a genealogist and family historian. We used to make the joke that she liked spending time with dead people more than her family. And now she makes the same joke to me because I'm always in cemeteries doing research, and I always blame her and tell her she's the one that caused this. um, but yeah, I love learning about the histories with small towns. A lot of these paranormal shows, they go to these big haunted locations like, the Queen Mary or the Conjuring House or Waverly Hills Sanatorium, but you never hear the small town stories. And I think that there's a lot of stories that need to be told that are very interesting, not just because of the paranormal, but they're historically relevant. And we just discovered Caroline Bonaparte. And when I say we just discovered, I grew up right outside of Messina, New York. And I've been to probably every cemetery that you could probably be in this area. And I never realized that she was up here. One of my friends who was a huge skeptic in the paranormal and used to make fun of me for going out looking for ghosts had an experience himself on the Oswegatchie River in Oxbow. He said one night he was sturgeon fishing off of Yellow Lake on the Oswegatchie, and he said it just was one of those nights where he didn't feel like you were alone. He's sitting by, his lantern, he's got his pole in the water, beer in hand, fire going. And he said he looked up, and on the other side, there was a woman in a white dress that was glowing. And she started walking down the dirt road. And at first he's thinking, what is somebody doing down here in a dress in the middle of the night? And she started to walk on the bridge, and then she disappeared right in front of him. He said he's never packed up his fishing gear so fast in his life, and he hadn't gone back there for quite a while. And he shared the story with me. And that intrigued me because seeing a full body apparition isn't unheard of, but it's very hard to believe. I don't know if you guys have any paranormal stories yourself, and I will be doing a Q&A, and I want to like kind of learn from you guys too, because it's important for us to hear the stories from everybody around here so we can kind of like match up and see if there's history that matches with the experiences that you guys have. So yeah, once we started doing the research in Oxbow, we found out that Caroline Bonaparte lived there with her husband Zebulon Benton, and she was a part of the Underground Railroad. And so she would help the slaves seeking shelter from the South heading north to Canada down the Oswegatchie River. We had the privilege to be the first paranormal investigation team to be into the Bonaparte house. We got to film in there, and it was really nice because the lady that lives there is part of the historical society. So we got to see things that Caroline actually owned. We got to be brought into the museum, and there's this piece of extension that they would wear, and it was made out of their own hair. And so we actually got to hold a piece of Caroline Bonaparte's hair in our hands, and it just made it a lot more surreal because she was an actual person. And I think that's the important thing we do on the show, is we take the spookiness a little bit out of the ghost story, because at one point these people were living. And that's another thing that I always tell people when ghost hunting, provoking that you see on shows to get activity. I don't believe in doing that. Because if it was your grandmother that had passed on, would you want somebody to come over yelling at her and going, "Hey, do something," you know? So I'm very respectful to the spirits. Um, so yeah, we went in, we did the investigation, we set up our equipment, and we started just doing the routine sweep that we do, and that's EMF readings. Because and we actually have a device here. This is a K2 meter, and what this does is this reads the electronic magnetic field. That can actually, if you have a high amount of electronic magnetic energy in the field, it can cause hallucinations, it can cause paranoia, it can cause vertigo. There's multiple things that it can mess with your body. So reading this around the basement of the area where people are having the experiences kind of tells us, is there something actually happening here, or are people being affected by faulty wiring, which we've had that happen in the years. And there were no readings. There was no faulty wiring. There wasn't any issue with that. So we went down there that night and we started up what we have over there is called the SB7. And after I'm done doing the panel, if you guys want to come up, I can kind of more show you what each piece of equipment does. Um, but we brought up the SB7 and we started asking the base questions. What's your name? What year is it? Because at some point, the spirit may not realize that the years had passed on. They may be stuck in that year that they passed. So we started the base questions, and finally we were like, "Is Caroline Bonaparte the lady in white?" Out of nowhere, just after I got done asking that question, yes, came right through with a female voice. And I'm like, okay. And Evan, he's worked on a lot of shows. He's been to some really crazy places. He's been to Chernobyl. He's done a ghost hunt in Chernobyl. He's been in the pyramids, down in the tombs. They've done ghost hunting down there. He's been to Doll Island. And if you've ever seen that, that is nightmare fuel. I will tell you right now, I'm not a doll person. So um, but yeah, no, Evan said that place, this area is the honey hole of paranormal because of the history, the emotion that is left up here. There's a lot to not only be learned about, but to experience. And that answer back was so strong. Um, the next question we followed up with is, where are you? And it said next to Jack. Of course, I went stiff as a board and goosebumps all over. And it was an intriguing moment to have such an intelligent response. So I kind of jumped back and forth. So please try to bear with me because I was going to do a linear story and I went from 8 years old to recent. Um, so I joined a paranormal team when I was 13 years old. And that was consisting of me and a couple friends being scared at night and going out and trying to do some research. And of course, my mom would, being a genealogist, any kind of excuse she had to help out and going digging into archives at the county, the county buildings, she would take it. Um, so yeah, it's been an amazing journey. There's been some crazy experiences throughout the way. I've done over 400 investigations in the past 23 years. Um, 95% of the time, you will sit in the dark talking to yourself if you're ghost hunting. The reality of a TV show when you go out there is there's a lot of entertainment purposes, but a real ghost hunt, you're gonna probably not get anything for the first 8 hours. Um, or you might, and if you do, good on you and be terrified because that's some really strong entities. um, I've had some crazy experiences along the way. I got called into Hogansburg up on the Akwesasne Mohawk Reservation. Um, they had a drug rehabilitation center where people were seeing a gentleman that was walking the property with an axe in his head. And at first, they were thinking this could just be somebody coming off withdrawals that can cause hallucinations. But then the staff started seeing it. And that's when they called up our team and they said, can you come in, set up some DVRs and some equipment and conduct an investigation? We said, of course, we'll help out. And so we went out there and we set up the equipment. First couple hours, it was quiet. We had a couple creaks here and there, which could be a squirrel. And then we decided they had a pool table. We took the cue ball off the pool table and we took electrical tape and put an X on the floor, put the pool ball there, and we said, if there's something here, and we also had a level with us. It's another thing. If you're ever using the ball method where you want them to push it, bring a level, make sure the floor is level because the ball will just roll by itself and you get all freaked out for nothing. So we leveled out the floor. We made sure everything was good to go. And oh, actually, Evan's on live right now, joining us in. So he's on TikTok watching. Um, so yeah, no, we leveled everything out and got the ball there, and we said, hey, if there's anything here, push the ball. About 20 minutes later, we're all leaving the room. We just hear a thud, and I looked at Dean, who was the head person of our investigation group. I went, what was that thud? And he goes, maybe a mop falling. I was like, that was a pretty loud mop if it was. And we walked in the room, and that pool ball was stuck in the drywall. Something had pushed it so hard that it went right into the drywall and stuck. So, I usually go into a paranormal investigation with no idea on what's really going on there because I am a medium empath. I don't talk about it much. I try to keep it more scientific because I want to show people the actual proof instead of, just going in and saying what I feel. I like to have both. Um, that being said, I went into one of the rooms and they said, we want you to sit in here by yourself in the pitch black for about 20 minutes and do an EVP session. They did not tell me that that room has spontaneously caught on fire twice. The Mohawk Reservation's fire department has come in. It's in the records that the wall just caught on fire. And I said, could it be faulty electrical and stuff? They said, no, they've had everybody come in and do the routine checks. There is one patch in the wall that has caught fire twice. I'm like, huh, okay. So this is after. They didn't tell me before because I would not have gone in there. The doors have slammed, girls have been pushed, it picked on women, and they did tell me that, and I did provoke. I don't usually provoke, but when they picks on someone like a child or somebody who's defenseless, like these women are trying to, do their job. A lot of them are nurses. They're going through trying to, distribute medication and helping people out, and this thing's just picking on them. So I got a little upset. And this is another point I'm getting at. Throughout the years, the way I've investigated has changed. There's been a humbling, is the best way I'll put it, on how I go about it. So I went in and sat in the middle of the room with the EVP recorder. The door shuts, not a ghost. They didn't tell me that. They tried to prank me. And I'm sitting there and I started with the questions. I said, what's your name? And then I'd ask the next question, when did you die? And I went through a period of questions, about a 20-minute session. And about 2 weeks later, I get a phone call. And when you have 8 cameras rolling 8 hours, that's a lot of footage you have to go through. So it's not just an overnight job. And so about 2 weeks later, I get a call from our I won't call him boss, but the head investigator. And he goes, I need you to listen to something about one of your EVP recordings. I said, which one? He goes, the broiler room. I said, well, this ought to be interesting. And he goes, I can only play you the first EVP that we caught. The second one I erased. The second he said that, I just got like this chill up my spine. I said, okay, go ahead and play it. And I said, what is your name? And this spirit came back and said, my full name in my voice. I didn't say anything. If you go back and look at the DVR and the time, they match up perfectly. It was not me. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more gut wrenching than hearing something trying to impersonate you, knowing your full name. I have never gone back to that location. I will never go back to that location. That is one of the scariest ones I've ever been through. The second EVP was when did you die? And it gave a future date. He erased it. One thing I will tell, if there's any young people here that are looking in, or anybody in general looking to get into the paranormal field, it is not a game. It is dangerous. It is something you need to be cautious about and respectful. There are things out there that will attach to you. There are things that will follow you home. On a positive note, there are things that will change your life, experiences that you can't get through doing anything else. The most memorable experience I ever had was I did an investigation in Morley, New York. I was at a grist mill that's right on the river, and it is a beautiful location during the day. But at night, I will tell you, nightmare fuel as well. But it's got a lot of history. St. Lawrence University had bought it, and we're building a museum. They were redoing it to, show people how grist mills worked back then. And they called us and they said the construction crew did not want to stay. And they told us that the power equipment was turning on by himself, doors were opening, they were hearing footsteps, men talking. And at one point, one of the guys said that he heard the mill running, which is impossible because the wheel's gone. There's no hole in the middle. They just started renovations. So that's what kind of, I think, sparked the activity. So we ended up going in, setting up our DVR cameras. We had 13 people show up. We did not have 13 people in that building. That's another thing. We always kept it in numbers of like usually four, two people watching the DVR, two people walking throughout the building. That way you don't have any conflicting evidence with, hearing footsteps or voices, could be somebody talking. So my cousin Dennis, who is a very well-known psychic in the North Country, he was part of our team, and we had him do the walkthrough. We didn't give him any history, and he started picking up things. And we got on the second floor. I remember it was about 1:30 in the morning, and Justin, who is a volunteer firefighter for Norwood Norfolk, radioed through to us and said, "Who's on the third floor?" Like, Dennis and I are on the second floor. Nobody's on the third floor. He's like, "Well, I'm looking at a guy." And I'm like, "I don't think you are, Justin." He goes, "You better get up there." So I'm 6'3". I'm not a small guy. And I have to go up this staircase that was built in the 1800s. Let me tell you, staircases back then, they didn't build people like us because they were like that wide. So I'm side shuffling up the staircase, and I finally get up to the top, and I had an infrared headlamp because we had the DVR systems up. And I said, "Well, where is this gentleman?" He goes, "He's standing 10 feet in front of you." And I'm like, "Justin, there's no one in front of me." He's like, "You need to come back down here right now." I said, "Okay." So I ran back down the stairs. We had a DVR system where you just had to do this and it rewound the footage. As he does it, there's a guy standing 10 feet in front of me with overalls, old mill worker. And where he's standing, there's no floor. It drops 3 stories down into the bedrock of the river. That's because they had just removed the pole. So to remove the pole, they had to take all the flooring out, rope it off, and take the wheel off and everything like that. So experiencing that, that was the first time that I've ever seen something on camera. Besides me just seeing something, I've always was told growing up, it's your imagination, or you get scared too easily. Now having something where I'm like, okay, hold on, there's something here. Um, and Evan and I have both been able to catch a couple things that probably some of the best evidence I've seen in 23 years of doing this, including an entity walking near the bridge on our show, which is SVC Explores the Unknown on YouTube. We do have a website, we have TikTok, we take people on live investigations as well. Um, yeah, we that night was crazy. It was like probably how Northern New York is. It was 30 degrees one time, and then it's like negative 15 the next minute. So it was really cold out that night. And Evan took his iPhone and he set it on the dashboard of my truck where it was parked. And we started talking into the GoPro filming. And we weren't paying attention to our surroundings. And there was fog on the water coming up. And he went back and watched the footage about 2 weeks later. He calls me and he goes, "I don't know what we caught, but we caught something really weird." I said, "It sure wasn't fog?" He goes, "Oh no, it wasn't fog." He goes, "You can see the legs. And it looks like a man walking behind one of the road signs in the fog. You can see the legs and the feet moving." I thought that was going to be the best evidence we ever caught in the show, but recently on episode 2 of season 2 that we just released on YouTube, there is an entity that we catch on the riverbank. It is not anything natural. Um, it's probably around my height, white, glowing, like really glowing. And you watch it jump up the riverbank and it almost like extends, like its body elongates and it's like up and it goes into the woods. And that night, we actually had my cousin, who is Dave Tracy. He's part of Fish and Wildlife for the Mohawk Reservation. And he's our cryptid guy. He helps out with local stories, which I have a lot of great stuff with that too that I'm going to share with you guys. And Dave said, "I see something off to the right. There's something watching us." And Dave's a hunter. He's not usually, he knows what animals are out there. He knows there's deer, coyotes. Sometimes we get a random wolf or something like that, or a bear. And he's like, "This thing's upright and it's about 60 yards that way, and I can see something moving back and forth." And that's right where we caught that entity. Now we didn't know that we caught that at that point, so it's just kind of weird then. And we at the end of episode 2, you'll actually see we have prints that I can't identify. We were wondering maybe melting, but it's been too cold, so the snow wouldn't really melt like that. But there was a whole track of them that went in, and we have a lot of cool evidence. That's coming up not this Friday, or actually, sorry, my days. Yes, it is this Friday. This Friday we'll be releasing episode 3, and that has that continuation of that. Um, a lot of the stories that I've heard from the reservation are really interesting about the Janasqua, which is the Mohawk Bigfoot, Dogman, which is a bipedal wolf-like creature, not a werewolf, but looks like a werewolf. We've had some really weird sightings. We've gotten prints that are unexplainable, wolf prints that are way larger than a regular wolf should be. The last print that we have, Dave has it on his person right now. We do actually have some plaster, and we're going to try to find some more. The print for the wolf was about that big. Now, a regular wolf print is usually about a baseball size. I mean, you sometimes will get larger ones, but that's pretty large. And the stories that we've heard are miraculous. Some from people who are in their 80s and 90s that have told us stories about what their grandfather saw. So stories going all the way back to the 1800s, I think was the earliest. So that would be the Dog Man. Then there's the Hoof Lady. She is the Baba Yaga of the reservation. If you were a child out after dark and you were misbehaving, Baba Yaga would, or yeah, Hoof Lady. Sorry, I already made the mistake. The Hoof Lady would come take you. And when I first heard this, I was like, okay, this is just moms making up these stories. Get my kids back in before the streetlights come on, because that's how you have to get your kids back in. And there was a woman I talked to. She was 75 years old. She told me when she was 8 years old that she saw the Hoof Lady. And I said, do you know that it was a Hoof Lady? You sure it wasn't just a woman you didn't know? She said this lady was wearing a long dress, and she was there's a place called Spaghetti Corners up in Hogansburg. Scary stretch road. The reason it's called Spaghetti Corners literally looks like you took a string of spaghetti and just threw it. Whoever designed that road, I don't know. And it just winds. And they said as she was going with her family around in the car, she said she looked out the window and she saw a woman standing there with a long dress, but when she looked at her feet, there were goat hoofs. And that's what the hoof lady is supposed to be, is a woman with goat legs. I've heard a lot of stories about it. I don't know how to feel it. I haven't experienced anything yet. And that's the thing. If I see that, there will be a different version of me sitting up here. I'll probably be crying. So the next story is the Serpent of the St. Lawrence. That is a 40 to 60-foot snake that has been told that it lives under an island. There's an island in the St. Lawrence River. I've not experienced anything, but I also had an older gentleman tell me about when he was 15 years old. He went out with his uncle on the boat and they went around the island. It's a very popular swimming point in the St. Lawrence River. And as he dove in, he had his leg touched by something very, very large. And when he went under to look, he at first thought it was like a sturgeon or something like that. And then he realized it was a lot larger than a sturgeon. He said that it could wrap itself around the boat. When it started moving, they were in a 15-foot like little schooner, like rowboat kind of thing. It was wrapped completely around the boat, and it still had 6 feet on each side. And he said it was just circling. And then all of a sudden, the shadow started getting less and less because the sun was out. They could see, and it then went underneath the island. Come to find out a couple years later, some people were scuba diving and they found there are tunnels under the island. Don't know how they got there, but they're there. I'm not going swimming in there. Evan, I've already asked Evan. Evan is a licensed scuba diver. So when you see if you guys ever watch the show Expedition Unknown, when Josh Gates is down there and they're looking for treasure, Evan's the guy behind the camera swimming right behind him. And he's also the first usually in the water because he's got to set up for the camera footage. So imagine, us telling Evan, hey, by the way, huge Serpent of the St. Lawrence is going to be in there. Hop on in now. He would probably still do it. He's a pretty gutsy guy. So yeah, that's a lot of the stories that we have up here so far. There's a lot more that keep on coming in. I have people messaging me every day telling me about experiences they've had, and that's one of the reasons why I asked Christine to be able to do this. If you've ever watched Finding Bigfoot, the town hall meetings that they have where people share their stories. I really wanted to meet everybody out here, and I've already had a lot of people come up and tell me their stories, and they're amazing. We want to really take upstate New York and put a light on it because not just the paranormal, but the historical facts, it gets overlooked a lot. And one of our catchphrases is telling history one ghost story at a time. We go in with the facts of the history and then we go to the paranormal. And that's how we get people interested this day and age. But yeah, no, there's cryptid stories. I could tell you a couple of cryptid experiences I've had. My first Bigfoot sighting I ever had was when I was 10 years old. My parents lived in Messina, New York. My dad was a lineman for Messina Electric. My mom was a nurse for Camp Potsdam. We lived on a dead end road. There was about 5 miles of power lines and dirt bike trails and all that stuff. A couple, me and my friends, we went out there and we were riding our bikes, and it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We didn't get done till about 7. We started realizing it was getting darker and darker throughout time. And we realized we need to start getting back because we're about 2 miles back, and we started riding our bikes. And that's when we noticed there was something about 40 or 50 yards to the right of us in the tree line. And it was moving along when we were riding our bikes. It was grabbing saplings like this as we were going. It was propelling itself like a skier would with ski poles. And we would stop, it would stop. So my first thought, I looked at my friend Mike and I said, "Is your big brother out in the woods like messing with us?" And he goes, "No, he's not even home." Huh. We started riding further. And that's when I got about a half a mile from the exit on the dead end road, and I turned and looked, and what I saw, it looked like a mix between a gorilla and orangutan. It had the facial features of an orangutan, but the body and black hair of a gorilla, but the legs were more bowed and they were standing upright. And when it looked at me and I looked at it, it was, I didn't feel afraid. It wasn't hunting. It was observing. If it wanted to get us, it would have got us. Um, so we ended up taking off because we all saw it. And I mean, we were close enough to where you could see detail. And that was enough for us. So we ended up riding out of there and told our parents, and they said, "No more sugar for you." So about 3 years later, I was in Russell, New York. My grandparents had a camp on the Lazy River. Went about 2 miles up north of their camp, and we would float back down and we'd just cast and reel in. We got into one area, and the smell was rancid. We thought we had just stumbled upon like a carcass of deer. It was just really bad. It smelled like a skunk and something dead. And all of a sudden, we start hearing this. "Hoo, hoo." And I'm like, "Is it a buck? Like maybe a buck, something like snoring?" And then all of a sudden, a boulder about this big gets thrown out of the tree line and comes and lands right next to the boat. And it threw it about probably 60, 70 yards. I mean, because the embankment goes up and it's just this rock face and it's all these trees and stuff. It came out of the trees. It landed probably only like 2 to 3 feet or a boat. We're drenched at this point. And my cousin goes, "Start the motor." And I'm like, "I don't know if I want to start this thing up." I was like, "Grab an oar, we're rowing at this point." So we did, and we got out of there. Of course, my grandfather, being a huge hunter, he owns 200 acres up in Parrishville. He's hunted his entire life. We go back, we're like, "Grandpa, Grandpa." And he's like, "What?" And we're like, "We had something throw a boulder at us." And he goes, "Oh, it must be the big Bigfoot out there, huh?" And of course, we're like, "You let us go out in this boat and you knew there was a Bigfoot out?" And he's laughing at us. Um, there's been a lot of crazy experiences, but the most scariest cryptid experience for Bigfoot, at least, actually, the most scariest Bigfoot experience I've ever had was in Carthage. There is a state forest, and I can't remember the name of it. That's terrible, but it's right outside of Carthage. Um, there's a lot of dirt trails and stuff like that. There's places that people go camp, and it's down near a swamp. So a girlfriend and I went down there. We were going to camp, have fire, cook, and drink and play guitar and sing and have a great time. That didn't go as planned. Um, we had the food. We were playing guitar, singing, having a great time. Starts to get dark. We get ready to get in the tent. We're laying down, and a pack of coyotes goes into a frenzy. We're like, they must have got a fresh kill, and they were far enough where we weren't worried. And then something else howled with them, and it had infrasound. So I don't know if you guys know what infrasound is, but Bengal tigers, they have infrasound. There's nothing really in the United States that has that. Lions have it, tigers have it. What it does is it's a um, low frequency sound that causes anxiety. Well, you can literally feel it in your chest when these things yell. So we hear this roar that it gives, and all of a sudden, all the coyotes went from yipping to nothing. And I looked at her and I went, "What was that?" "I have no idea." And then all of a sudden we hear one of these coyotes getting ripped into, and it wasn't a frenzy. Something was killing it. We didn't grab our sleeping bags. I literally folded the tent with everything in it, threw it in the trunk, and we left. Um, I was not sleeping there that night. That was one of the most horrific sounds I've ever heard in my life. The infrasound, having that happen, I know it wasn't a natural creature. I mean, I've ran into coyotes, wolves, black bear, and whether the DEC wants to believe it or not, I have ran into a mountain lion. I know the difference between a bobcat, a lynx, and a mountain lion. Um, I've had a mountain lion actually come into near one of the places we were going to investigate. Um, the big tail was the tail that was 3 feet long coming off of it, and it weighing probably around 180 to 200 pounds. Um, that was really scary experience. The scariest paranormal experience with being in a with having like wildlife come in. We had a black bear come in one of our investigations. And that was me and my cousin Eric. We're up in Russell. There's a small little cemetery that's from 1820. And as we're conducting the investigation, Eric's moving around and we hear a twig snap. And I looked at him and I was like, "Did you do that?" And he goes, "No." It's like it came from the woods. And I'm doing this whole sweep with a flashlight. And all of a sudden I come across and there's a black bear about 20 feet behind Eric. And I'm like, "Hey, Eric, do me a favor." And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, just grab the equipment and walk towards the truck. And he's like, "Why?" And I was like, don't ask questions, Eric. Just do it." He's like, "You're acting weird." And I was like, "Do you want me to scream? You don't want me to scream." So we packed up the equipment and yeah, it was probably a good 200-pound black bear just standing right behind him. And I was just watching him. And we had no idea. And a lot of these animals can be quiet up here. You'll be surprised how quiet black bears are. Evan got to experience that with me when we were up at Lake Bonaparte. We were up where all the caves are over at so as you're going over towards Green Pond actually, and we went out there. It was cold as hell. It was right before winter, and probably 15, 20 degrees out, and we just started hearing movement, and we heard a really weird howl, and we're like, we need to go check this out. So Evan tells me he's bringing a spotlight with him. And so I'm thinking he's going to bring something like this spotlight that I have down here on the table, just something a little handheld. He brings something that looks like it belongs in Ghostbusters. I mean, it has a battery pack that's like this big. It weighs like 6 pounds. I was like, "Dude, we got to pack light when we're going through the woods." It's like, what are you talking about? You're carrying it. And I'm like, "Okay." So I have this big battery pack and this big flashlight, and I'm doing a sweep. And I mean, this thing lights up the forest. It's all for photography because he does the photography and videography. So it turned the night into daytime. So I'm like sweeping over, and all of a sudden, I'm standing right next to this large rock face where there's like these holes. And I just go like this, and I look up, and there's just a black bear sitting up looking down at me. I said, "Time to go." And he goes, "Why?" And I go like this, and he looks up and he sees it, and he goes, "Yep, time to go." Was like, "Yeah, it's not time to be out here right now. They're looking for food. They want to, be ready for winter." So that was the couple of the creepy ones. Um, the creepiest experience I've ever had with the dog man would have to be on the Akwesasne Reservation. Dave and I, who is my cousin who works for Fish and Wildlife, we got a story from the people that own the Turtle's Nest Diner. It's out in Hogansburg. They said that her husband was out there building this big, beautiful house out in the woods. They have 70 acres back there, and they are getting large wolf prints. Um, and they've had some howling, they've had some weird stuff. Her husband's actually seen something large bipedal that looks like a wolf. And they said, "Hey, if you wanna go back there, feel free. Hop in your truck, drive back there." I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it. See what happens." We were there for 6 minutes and 45 seconds. The only reason I know is because the live ended at 6 minutes and 45 seconds. It was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had because we decided to pull up, shut off the truck, shut off the lights. All we had on was a infrared headlamp, and I had it up on my sun visor to give that ambiance for TikTok, the mood lighting for the creepiness. And it's so quiet in the woods. There's no crickets, there's no birds. Like that's not a good sign. Usually when there's no small wildlife, there's a predator around. So we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, my antenna on the top of my truck, it's a CB antenna, just gets ripped and it slaps back down with a magnet. Now I'm 6'3". I can't reach up there and grab it myself. I have to hop on the side of my truck to grab it. So whatever did it, grabbed it, brushed up against the side of the truck. Now, Dave did not tell me he had his 9mm pistol with him. So all I heard was my glove box go click, and I'm like, "You are not shooting across from me." Like, "Do not put holes in my truck, Dave." And he's like, "Dude, it's right next to your side." I'm like, "Yeah, put the gun away." So I was like, "You're probably just gonna tickle it at that point." So we started the truck up and we get out of there. And the woman that owned the turtle's nest saw us driving out of the woods, and she's just waving, and we're just like, "Just keep going, just keep going." We went back the next day and told her what happened. The craziest part, there was hair scratches all the way down the side of my truck. And they were thick. They weren't like deer hair scratches because I've hit a deer at 60 miles an hour. I know what deer hair scratches. These are coarse, they're thick. And apparently later on that week, they found wolf prints right in the area where we were, and very big wolf prints. So one of the scariest stories up there too, they have a big farm for the reservation. They have pigs, they have chickens, and they actually had, I think it was 400-pound pigs that died. There's mushrooms that if pigs eat them, they'll actually pass away. It will cause, it's poisonous to them. And so what they have is they have this composting area where they'll lay any of the animals that passed away and let it just kind of, any natural predator like a bear or coyote that wants to come and eat it will come and eat it. They won't move it. It's 400 pounds of dead weight. So, well, that's what they thought. They put it in there, and the next day when they came, they were gone. Something had dragged the two 400-pound pigs through the woods and made a hole in the brush, and it went and left with them. A black bear will usually just rip off a chunk. Coyotes will just stay in one area, eat it there. So whatever this was, it had enough power to pick up two 400-pound pigs and drag them through the woods. So we went out there the other day. Actually, we went on a live TikTok investigation out to the reservation. We stumbled upon a cow corpse, a deer corpse, and a dog corpse in the middle of the woods. The dog corpse was sad because I'm a dog owner, so I have my JJ. I don't know if you guys watched my channel or had been, but he was a paranormal investigator, my dog. I bring him along with me sometimes on the investigations. He's a red heeler pit bull. He is a sweetheart. The coolest thing with him, I took him on a paranormal investigation to a cemetery called Barnhart Cemetery. Now, this was established in 1950 because when they did the Eisenhower Project, they tore apart a lot of villages in the St. Lawrence River. They're now, a lot of them are submerged, and they moved the gravestones, but the person that I talked to who worked for the project, they never moved the bodies. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Poltergeist, yeah. So this cemetery is very, very haunted. So I took JJ with me, and I had a tiny house van at this point. Now, my TikTok followers used to call it the Magic Spirit Bus because everybody loves the Magic School Bus, but not the Magic Spirit Bus. So the cool part was that is you could just pull into an area, you sit back in your recliner, turn on all your paranormal equipment, see what happens. So JJ's asleep at my feet, and he's not moving. He actually snores. It's adorable. Um, and so he's snoring, and I'm sitting there, and I'm asking questions on the SB7. I said, if there's anybody here, can you give us some kind of sign? All of a sudden, JJ just sits straight up and points out the door, and he starts growling. He will only do that if there's somebody outside the vehicle that he doesn't know. He'll be like, get back, which let me tell you, if you get this dog a hot dog, he'll help you rob my house. So he's harmless. So I'm watching him and I'm like, he's intense, like the hair's sticking up, he's growling, he's mad. And I'm like, JJ, what is it? And I have the spirit box in the back, and a spirit comes through and goes, stay doggy. And this is on our TikTok, and it was all live, and I'm like, okay, that's good enough for me. That's all the evidence I need. There's something here. And he sat back down and went back to sleep. It was a crazy experience. So we're trying to incorporate bringing him with us. We actually want to put a GoPro on him, a tactical little vest, and get him to run off and do his thing and see what he captures. Now that would be with the paranormal stuff because I don't want him going out with the cryptid stuff because probably will never see him again. So, but yeah, he's a great little partner to bring with me. I've been doing the investigations with him for now going on 3 years. So yeah, it's crazy. Do you guys have any questions for me or any haunted locations you want to know about? Any experiences?
Yeah. You ever been to the Burville Cider Mill?
I have, only for the donuts.
Yeah.
I've heard that it's haunted. I have. There's a lot of places up here that have those kind of stories that you never know, and then you go in there and you have to ask the question. That's one thing Evan always laughs about. Like I'll go up to Dunkin' Donuts and I'll be at the drive-through. The girl will bring my coffee to me and I'll be like, "Hey, have you heard any ghost stories locally?" Most of the time I'll get that look like, "Nope, shut the window, lock, see ya, yeah, have a good one." But most of the time, like there's a couple times where we've done it and they're like, "Oh yeah, this location," and it's places I grew up around. I'm like, I never knew that place had a story. And so yeah, I've heard of the Burville. I was living in Copenhagen for a while. Copenhagen in general is creepy, and there's a lot of history around that area with I believe the War of 1812. Um, that's the other thing going into the history and starting to learn about our area. I never realized that most of northern New York was underwater at one point. There was a thing called the Lake of Champlain, the Great Lake of Champlain, that covered a lot of the St. Lawrence River. Messina would have been underwater, Malone. Um, and the people called the Palo Indians would have been using this lake at that time. And this is 14,000 years ago. So you have fossils that you will find up here. Um,
the other cool experience, if you guys ever heard of the town Newton Falls. So Newton Falls, a lot of people say it's a cursed town. It's because it doesn't have a Dollar General. I don't know. If you have a Dollar General, you know you've made it, right? But yeah, they people have said that it was land that was sacred to the natives, and that's why they say it's a cursed town. They had the factory there, it closed down. Nothing can be really established there. They had a lot of stuff. They had things that were thriving for a while, and then it just kind of died out. Well, I took one of my friends, Eric. We went up there to do an investigation down by the water. I actually got a story from a gentleman. He said he was out there fishing. Newt Falls is like an amazing area to go out and go fishing. There's a lot of amazing species out there. You have like bass, pike, walleye. So it's just good fishing. And he was out there one night and he said, just standing there fishing, casting my line. He said, all of a sudden, canoe comes right by, Native American in the canoe, and then he just disappears. And he goes, he's like looking at his drink, like, what did I just drink? Like, he told me that story. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go check it out. So we went live on TikTok and YouTube and Facebook. We went out and we started, just asking the normal questions. And we had a fire going. And that's another story I'll share after this. The first time that me and Eric went to this location, I'll tell you the story. We were supposed to have this big bonfire near the water. It was gonna be really nice. We're gonna hang out, cook some hot dogs. We get all the way there, and it's a freezing night. Neither one of us brought a lighter. Neither one of us brought matches. And we're like, oh my God. And if you know Newton Falls, there's no place to go buy any of that. So we're like, oh, what can we do? I will tell you, this is redneck ingenuity at its finest. We went to the back of his car. We found a copper wire. We found a little Debbie box, hand sanitizer, and some wrapping paper from Christmas. We took wrapping paper, put it in a little Debbie box, squirted the hand sanitizer, put the rod through it, and hooked his jumper cables up, and we got a fire going. That is how we started the fire. So everybody calls that the Little Debbie snack point. Like it's like that little area. So this time we brought a lighter, thank God. And we started the fire up and we just started asking the normal questions, what's your name and why are you here? What year is it? And I started thinking, there's a lot of French settlers up here. So a lot of times you'll have people that may not understand what you're saying. Now that's something in the paranormal field people are going, I think once you're in the spirit world, you can understand any language. There's no barrier at that point, but I always like to try to find out. So my first thing I said to him was, Bonjour, je m'appelle Jacques, je suis parle un petit peu français, préfère anglais, s'il vous plaît, which is, my name's Jack. I speak a little bit French, but prefer English. And there's been times where I've had people talk back in French, and there's been times where we've had nothing. Nothing happened that time. But the cool part was about 10 minutes later, we asked what tribe they're from. He said, are you from the Akwesasne? Are you from the Mohawk? Nothing. And at this point, I realized that I did have some sage Palo Santos, which is really good for energizing the area, also cleansing the area. So I kind of gave an offering and I said, I don't mean to be provoking. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you, your people at all. And I placed the sage in the fire. Walked away. Fire ends up dying out. It just got so cold. Everything was wet. There was no timbers. There was no coals. There was nothing hot enough to re-spark. And we were still trying to figure out who was there. And I realized I kept on saying Akwesasne, Mohawk, Iroquois, trying. And those aren't the names that they really had. The Iroquois wasn't called the Iroquois. They were called the Haudenosaunee. And so at that point, I was like, oh, okay. I said, are you a part of the Haudenosaunee? I kid you not. And we have this all on live. The fire literally sparks. And then like the fire just goes up and we got drum beats in the background. And it was just that just off the background. And we didn't hear it with our own ears, but we saw the fire going. And then we went back, watched the video, and I have the headphones on. I'm enhancing the audio, and I'm like, holy crap, those are drum beats. And he's like, yeah. And I played it for my cousin Dave, who's a part of the Mohawk tribe, and he goes, yeah, those are tribal drum beats. So it was a really, really cool experience. Trying to think what other stories I had. I've been able to go to Gettysburg. That was really amazing. Got to take tours of a lot of the historical sites. Got to go to the Gettysburg Orphanage. Really sad place. Very active though too. Have you been? Oh,
I'm going this weekend.
oh, are you? That headmistress. So if you guys, oh, have you? That vibe, yeah. No, it's a really sad story. There was a good headmistress. She ended up leaving. A new one came in, and I guess wasn't her real name. They don't know who the lady actually was. There's no historical records of this woman. But she tortured the children of the Gettysburg Orphanage. She had barrels that were filled with water, and when a child misbehaved, the child was put in the barrel. It's a very sad, emotional place. I've done one investigation there, and it's it's different when you go into a place like that, and it has. I was expecting to go in and feel more like an evil sense, like she was there, and you guys kind of know it's just a sad feeling. They're still stuck there. Oh yeah. We weren't able to go to the Devil's Den. We chose that weekend. We get up there, and it's Boy Scout of America weekend. You couldn't get into the like we got into the park, but there were Boy Scouts like everywhere. And like I felt so bad. I used to be a Boy Scout up here in upstate New York, so I felt so bad for the scout leaders because I'm watching them and they're climbing up the rocks. I'm like, well, these kids could disappear in one of these cracks. They're not gonna know where he is. But it is scary up there. But it's also really it's humbling when you go out to the battlefield. I got to walk up on top of the fire tower and overlook the battlefield. And when you think that over 50,000 Americans lost their lives in this area, it makes you wonder what kind of residual energy is left up here. And I think that's why Evan and I, why we focus on upstate New York. We call it the honey hole of the paranormal, the Oak Island. If you've ever seen The Curse of Oak Island, which everybody's out there like, yeah, 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 Oak Island is an amazing show, and we really think that upstate New York is kind of like that with the paranormal, cryptids, UFO kind of stories, um, because having all of the history from the French Indian War, War of 1812, even the Underground Railroad. And if you haven't watched our show, it's SVC Explorers of the Unknown on YouTube. We're on TikTok. We have a website and everything. We found out that Caroline Bonaparte, the niece of Napoleon Bonaparte, lived in Oxbow, New York, and is buried in Oxbow, New York. She was a part of the Underground Railroad. She was an amazing person. Um, she sacrificed so much to help these people, and she was married to a man named Zebulon Benton from the town of Oxbow. He was more of a shyster. He was like, I'll make myself out of. He would wear stuff that was looked like Napoleon. He put his hat sideways, put his hand in his lapel, would walk around town, and he owned a silver mine. He was part of a bank in Watertown. Um, he left Caroline with some debt, and she ended up becoming a French teacher, and she also ended up teaching piano in Watertown, New York. Um, but the Underground Railroad thing was really amazing. We were the first team to ever do a paranormal investigation of there. We got some amazing evidence. I would suggest if you want to learn about the history of Oxbow, check it out. It is a great show. We get to meet with all the local historians, um, and they get to tell us a lot about that. Um, The other cool thing I've gotten to do is after doing Gettysburg, I got to be the first paranormal team to go into a cave that was over 3 million years old. It is called the Black Coffee Caves in Pennsylvania. It was my first cave time going in a cave. I've never been in one before. I got to see like all the stalactites, and there's wiring all originally from the 1800s. It was this big tourist attraction. People would come from all over to just walk underground and see all these stalactites and things that have been here for millions of years. And I got asked to go, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going." Um, and the guy looks at me and he goes, "Hey, just make sure before we go in, you bring more than one flashlight." And I said, "I feel like there's a story behind this." Apparently, they had a spelunker who went in. Guy only brought one flashlight. His battery died, and he was lost for 2 days in the cave. Because once you're in there and there's no natural light, because all the cave entrances are sealed, there's no electricity running down there now. He was lost for 2 days. He lived. He was fine, but I carry multiple flashlights for that reason. So ghost hunting tip, always carry multiple flashlights, carry extra batteries. Um, let me see. So yeah, we got down there. There's no animals that are down there because they're all sealed. The only entrance is through the really cool thing is it's a house from, I think they said the house was built in the 1790s. So you walk into the house, it's a beautiful farmhouse. And they have the whole museum and they have found things from when the caves first opened in the 1800s. And it's like these little tchotchke pieces of glassware that it says coffee caves. So they were originally called the coffee caves, and then the Black family just bought it and they reopened it, and now they call it the Black Coffee Caves. So they incorporated the name. So they have like all the old stuff that they used to sell at the shop and take people on tours. So we ended up going in and getting the grand tour, and you walk into the house, and it looks like you'd be sitting around and you'd be having a family dinner. They open the basement door, and it looks like the Bat Cave. You're just walking down concrete stairs into all these stalactites, and so we got down towards the bottom. And one team that I was with, they went off and they were filming a TV show that they're working on, and they went and did their thing. And I went, you know what? I'm gonna go by myself because I didn't have Evan with me. It was just me. So I was like, okay, flashlight, good. Equipment, I got it. So I started walking and I found this little side cavern off to the corner. And I said, I'll just sit in there. And so I was only in that place for about 2 minutes because I'm sitting like this and I get the EVP recorder set up. I have the flashlight on, I got my camera on, and I'm like, okay, EVP session, Black Coffee Caves, Pennsylvania. And I'm like, okay, what do I ask? And all of a sudden, right behind me, I hear a growl. And it sounded like a bear growling. And I'm like, and we're out. That's cool. That's good enough for me. Because they're like, there's no bears. There's nothing able to get in there. All the caves are sealed up. So the second I heard the growl and caught it on tape, I was just like, got enough evidence I need. Haunted. Check mark. Because behind me is the waterfalls. There's nothing back there for it to stand on. There's literally nothing but like, I think it's like a 70-foot plummet into this watery cave area. So there's not going to be like a bear or anything behind me. But yeah, that was pretty terrifying to hear a growl coming up from behind me after like 2 minutes of sitting in there. So that was enough for me. But yeah, no. Throughout the years, there's been a lot of crazy stuff, and there's been a lot of nights where we're gonna have a shirt in our merch. We have a merchandise store that we're working on right now because we're getting the LLC and everything. And the shirt's gonna say ghost hunting 95% of the time, sitting in the dark talking to yourself, because that is the reality of being a ghost hunter. You're just sitting talking to yourself. Um, so yeah, I always thought that'd be fun to make. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or want to know anything about ghost hunting, feel free to ask. I ask you if you want to come up and talk to me, feel free. But I appreciate you all coming in and sitting down and listening to me ramble on for the last hour. So yeah, any questions? It's fun. That's that. Christine and I are working with Fort Drum. I have permission to go out there. We have an archaeologist who's going to go with us, going to do a tour. And we will be shooting an episode at the Luray Mansion because James D. Luray Chamont sold the property to Joseph Bonaparte, which is Napoleon's brother. So it's a part of kind of the show. So I've heard a lot of things about the Luray Mansion. I haven't been there yet, but I'm excited to go. Oh, really? Oh, that's really cool. Sounds like I'm in for quite a night. Yeah, I've been to the craziest place in New York has been the Hinsdale House. That's featured on every ghost show that you'll ever see. It's right below Rochester. And Ed and Lorraine Warren were there in 1970, and they did an exorcism of the house because the family was experiencing some really bad hauntings. And they came in, and Lorraine said that there was something evil in the house, and they conducted the exorcism. They said when they did this, the whole house shook. There was screaming, and it was crazy creepy. So usually you can go and investigate at night, and then you have to leave. They want you to go stay at a hotel. They let me spend the night in the living room. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but about 2 o'clock in the morning, I actually heard somebody walking around upstairs talking, and one of the guys I worked with, one of the teams I work with, is Scope. Scope is Soul Connections of Paranormal Encounters. They're out of Syracuse, New York, and John, who is retired military, was sleeping to the left of me, and Sheila's behind me on the other couch, and I'm laying there, and I start hearing this walking and talking. I open my eyes, and all I could think, did Sheila or John go upstairs? And I turn and look, and John's just looking at me like this. I was like, how long has this been going on? He's like, 15 minutes. I was like, holy crap. So, but the funniest thing that happened there was I wear a CPAP when I sleep. I'll admit it. I Top Gun it at night. That's what I call it. And I'm laying there on the couch. I didn't sleep that night. After we got woke up about 2 in the morning, I'm like, oh, I'm not going back to sleep. So I'm just gonna take a nap in the afternoon, about 3 o'clock. I'm just gonna lay on the couch, put my CPAP on, and just get some sleep. Not a problem. So I'm laying there, and all of a sudden I hear someone talking. I'm like, here we go again. Spirits are gonna keep me up all day. I have another investigation tonight, and it gets louder and like more. I'm like, okay, they're right next to me. I sit up, and there's the window right here, and there's a guy with his face like this because he heard about the haunted Hinsdale house, and all he sees is me come up with my CPAP like this. Ran so quick, he fell. He's like scrambling. So I'm now one of the ghosts of the Hinsdale house. So yeah, so that was one of the funny stories. The other one, my friend actually, I have a lot of friends that do Civil War reenacting. My friend Dan was in Gettysburg for one of their anniversaries. Actually, they're having a huge event, and he he's got one of the darkest sense of humors I know, and I love the guy for that reason. And they got up one morning. He was representing the Confederates, and they were in full Confederate gear, and they're walking around. It's foggy. If you guys been to Gettysburg, fog happens there all the time, all the time. It's like a natural thing. And so the sun's rising. It's beautiful. Fog's all over the battlefield. There's these beautiful statues, and they start walking up, and they see this Confederate statue. And he said he gets up to the top, and they're just like, just having a moment, kind of just feeling the era. He's not into the paranormal, but he's huge into history. He's a history major for Harvard University and St. Lawrence University. The guy's like an encyclopedia that's ridiculous. And they're just having that peaceful moment, and all of a sudden they hear a blood curdling scream, and they're like, and there is a whole family standing down on the highway, looking up, seeing two Confederate soldiers standing in the fog, and they're like, ghosts, and they're screaming and pointing at him. And he looks at his buddy, and they both have such a dark sense of humor. Without saying a word, they both walk slowly into the fog. And so the funny thing is, he goes back about 3 years later, and there is a ghost tour giving the story about the two Confederate soldiers on the hill. I was like, yep. So yeah, there's been a lot of fun people I've got to work with throughout the years of doing this, a lot of funny stories. If you're not having fun with it, then change it, you know? There's time to have fun, there's time to be respectful and be cautious as well. Especially up here, if you're doing investigations, you don't just have the paranormal. I'm more scared of the living than I am the dead. So the only way I'm going to put it. Um, I've told you guys about the black bear. The craziest experience I've had with the living, I'm not going to share that one. That one's a little bad. Uh, that was in Vermont. That was terrifying. There was one in Messina, New York. I was on a paranormal investigation of an area called Springs Park. A lot of people don't go to Messina and realize that Springs Park was like a world traveling destination at one point. Sulfur water was supposed to be the healing ability to heal all your ailments, and people would travel from all around the world. Springs Park was filled with cast iron tubs, and it was just this hotspot for a lot of people. And people have said that they'll see people in time period clothing walking around Springs Park. You'll hear talking. You'll hear things that don't make sense. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go down there. This is the town. My dad worked for Messina Electric Department. My mom's a nurse for Canton Potsdam. I said, yeah, I'm going to go check this out. This is cool in my hometown. So I'm sitting down there. And now I drive a big black Ford F-150 that I have a yellow light on top, and I have a spotlight now so I don't have to get out for cryptids. I have a remote control spotlight. Uh, and I'm sitting there, and this guy pulls up behind me, and I'm sitting in the truck, and I see him kind of looking over at me, and I'm like, next thing you know, he's got a AK-47 in his hand, and he's walking at the front back of my truck. He's got this huge clip, and he's got it right. Apparently, he was a drug dealer, and he thought I was Messina PD because Messina PD got a black Dodge Ram 1500. Mine was a Ford. So this whole time, he thinks I'm down there to bust him for drugs. So he was about to come up and shoot me. So I drive out of there as quick as possible. And they arrested him 4 hours later, and they found the AK. They found 20 pounds of, I think it was methamphetamine. Yeah, scary experience. So when you're doing investigations, if you are doing investigations in upstate New York, be careful, get permission. Always get permission. Never go on private property without. The best thing I would suggest is meeting up with your local historical society. Make friends with the police officers because they are going to be very helpful to keep you safe. They will also let you know the rules and regulations of where you can go, where you can't go. I've been swatted before, and a lot of young kids will know what that is. That's when somebody calls and says that you're doing something illegal. I've had state troopers pull up and go, "Oh yeah, you're that ghost guy. Okay, have a good one." So always let them know who you are. Trying to give a couple tips. Like I've said, never provoke, never be disrespectful. Always, treat them as if they were a relative that's passed on. Always go in duos. Don't ever go alone. That's one thing I've had to say to Evan. He knows how dangerous that doing paranormal investigations can be up here. He had his foot go into a cave when we were filming. He almost broke his ankle. It is very easy when you're up at Lake Bonaparte. If you go over to the Trail to Green Pond, don't go off the trail unless you have somebody with you and you kind of know what you're doing. Because we did, and we started climbing the rock face. And as you get up to the top of the rock face, there are cracks in the ground. And he had his leg fall in. And luckily enough, I was there with him. I've done paranormal investigations and some of the creepiest, craziest things. We did a solar eclipse investigation during this whole solar eclipse when everybody was all driving around the craziness. We're standing in the cemetery wondering what we're doing with our lives. And we've I've done stuff in thunder and lightning storms. The worst one is I brought a guy from Tennessee. He's a famous paranormal investigator on TikTok and YouTube. Kalani Ghost Hunter is his name. And he came up here with me and he's like, dude, my paranormal equipment will not turn on. There's got to be something with the EMF or something. And I went, no, Kalani, it's negative 35 with the wind chill. And he looks at me and goes, what the hell are we doing outside? Our batteries literally couldn't get warm enough to keep going. So, um, Evan, I know wouldn't mind me sharing this story with you guys. If you guys have ever watched the show, I told you all the shows, but I know we have some new people that came in. Evan is filmed for Finding Bigfoot, Expedition Unknown. Destination Truth was a classic. Everybody loves that show. Destination Truth, Evan, it was his first week on the job. It was his first time being in a paranormal investigation. And they were in Romania to this haunted forest. There was an area of forest that nothing would grow. There was no grass, there were no trees. It was just dead. A lot of people had said they had heard voices, they had seen lights and shadows, and people had said they had been attacked. And of course, it's Evan's first day on the job, and Josh Gates looked at him and said, "Hey, do you mind, going out there and doing a session by yourself?" Evan's like, "Yeah, I got this. Let's go." And so he goes out, and they get set up, and he's conducting his paranormal investigation. And he said about 20 minutes in, I think it was, all of a sudden he just felt this breeze come down. And if you guys haven't seen it, I'll have to try to get a copy of it up on the channel. Evan got thrown about 20 feet. He went from sitting with his legs crossed to disappearing off the night vision camera. He said he just remembered something hitting him like wind, him getting picked up. They ran out to find him. He was gone. It took them about 15, 20 minutes to find him. He was unconscious in the hedges, about, I think he said 40 or 50 yards off to the left. Um, Gouge marks in his arm, like something had grabbed him. I've actually got to see the scars. It looked like something looked like a raptor had grabbed him. It was so creepy the way that the scratches were. He said he doesn't remember anything about it. He remembers feeling the wind and then blacking out and then waking up in the bushes to everybody standing above him. He said that's what sparked his interest in the paranormal. That's what he was like, because he was a skeptic, full skeptic until that happened. And then he's like, okay, there's something here. So both of us have experienced so much here in upstate New York, and we're really excited to continue doing the show up here and telling the stories of all the small towns. We started with Oxbow just because of the Caroline Bonaparte story. It just kind of fell in our lap. We always say that it was like basically the other side was like, here's your story, go with it. And we are grateful to be able to say that we have closed that story about her, the lady in white, Caroline Bonaparte, and we are now working on some new ones. But if there's no questions, I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening to me ramble on more. And if you want to come up and tell me some of your stories, if you want to see some of the equipment, I guess I had till 2 o'clock, so I can kind of just explain what each piece of equipment does. So I'll stand up and do that. I think our TikTok died out, so. But a lot of people realize that when they come up, they think all this stuff is really fancy. They're like, oh man. And then they go, oh wait, my dad has that. It's like, yeah, your dad usually does have it. We got walkie-talkies, of course, night vision goggles. We have trail cameras, uh, digital thermometer. Comes in handy for a lot of stuff, cold drafts especially. Um, this is a parabolic microphone. You can hear for about half a mile with this. Headlamp, of course. Now, I've already had a couple people come up and kind of just do this, and they're like looking at it like, does it have electronics with it? So with this, this is something we're just incorporating. We use a laser as like a laser grid to see if something like crosses in front of the laser and cuts the light off. So what we're going to do is have another small tripod shooting the laser straight into this orb. Now, when something breaks a laser, you don't usually notice because it's like breaking a string or a fishing line. But when something is giving light to this orb and breaks that laser, that's going to go black. But when it's hit with a laser, it glows like a light bulb. So it's a really cool way so we can visually see if something breaks that grid. Of course, Christine came over, already made fun of me about the gloves and everything. So when we go out and we do cryptid investigations, we come across scat, fur. We've actually come across blood before. We actually had to call the state troopers because we thought we stumbled on a crime scene. There was a branch that was about this big that was just drenched in blood. And my first thought was, could it just be a deer that was bleeding out? A hunter that made a shot in an area that he wasn't supposed to, because we were up there like Bonaparte. And I actually ended up taking the branch with me because it was raining. We were way off the trail and I didn't want to lose it just in case if it was important for something. So didn't have gloves at that time. So that's why we built this kit, is because I wanted to make sure I didn't contaminate anything. So we took the branch, we went and drove right to the Governor State Police Barracks, brought it up to them, kind of explained what we found. And then they told me that I have to go to the Watertown Barracks or Carthage Barracks with it. Called them. They said, don't bother bringing it. We're going to have a detective call you. So I waited for the detective to call and kind of gave him the whole spiel. He asked if looked if there was any foul play. Did you find a body? I said there would have been a different call if they found a body. Um, he goes, do you know if it's human or not? And I said, well, I don't have a blood testing kit. We are buying one now, just in case we find something like this again. And so I called my friend who's a retired Suffolk County sheriff, and he told me there's one way that is an old school way of telling if it's human or if it's animal, and that's smelling it. And I looked at Evan, I went, not it. And he already had his finger like this, and I'm like, so I had to smell it. If you smell it and it smells like fruit and something rotten, it's usually a deer. Deer will be eating the berries and everything. But if it has a really strong metallic smell, usually that's a good tell that it could be human. When we smelled it, it smelled like a copper tank. So it was very human smelling blood. So I called back the sheriff and he said, if you don't have a body, you don't have foul play, there's nothing we can really do until we have proof that, it wasn't just the hiker that, cut his leg. And I was like, if he cut his leg this bad where there's this much blood, then you probably do have a body up here. So I sent him pictures and they know about it. So the weird part was this branch was also sitting next to a very large piece of quartz, a flat stone. Almost looked like a table. Come to find out, there are some people that go up there and do stuff that is a little dark. And I had brought this branch home. Rule number one, never bring anything home from a paranormal hotspot. That was my idiotic behavior because I'm thinking of it as a crime scene and not as, could this be ritualistic? Could this be something else? So I bring this branch home and my fiance at the time looked at me and she goes, I don't want this thing in my house. It's like, okay, fair enough. We'll put it in the garage. So I had it stored away and the garage was torn apart. Like we had footsteps, we had boxes that were being tossed around. It was like you put a raccoon inside of the garage. It was just really weird. And so I called John, who's the guy from Scope. He takes haunted items all the time. I was like, you need to come get this branch from me. And I was like, why? And he's like, why? And I was like, this thing's tearing apart my house right now. And it's just really weird. Even the nephews are seeing shadows. I don't like it. And so he took the branch. Um, so yeah, rule number one, never take haunted items. Yes. We have. The only other time I've ever done that was I got a call from actually the guy that's the retired Suffolk County police officer. He was like, "Hey, you're into the haunted stuff," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm into the haunted stuff." And he goes, "Well, I have a piece that might be like considered an artifact for like hauntings." And I was like, "Okay, what do you got?" And he goes, "1989, I worked down in on the Amityville house. I was the part of the construction crew to tear it down to the bones and make it into the apartments that they are now. It's actually, I think it's a townhouse. It's two parts. They had to remove the half moon windows and then they had to remove the flooring and basically everything went right down to the bones. Unfortunately, the half moon windows had to be thrown out. One of them was thrown out, the other one was kept by the guy he was working with. The weird part is, 5 years after they took the half moon windows, the man that took that one killed himself. And the window is nowhere to be found. Nobody can find it. So don't really know where that is. That's as far as we can go with that because we don't know what happened to it. I got a floor grate from the bedroom where the family was murdered. I said I would love to put this in a museum, like a haunted museum. And I did have Zach Bacon's museum reach out to me, and they were like, "Yeah, we want it." And I'm like, "No," because he offered me 10 grand for it. And I'm like, I don't want anybody doing seances. I want it to be as a display as a historic haunted piece, and not having people doing like seances and like trying to summon whatever could be attached to the house if it is in fact haunted. I've never been to the Amityville house, so I can't say one way or the other. Um, but I did conduct an investigation around it. I, brought the laser grid that we had, K2 meter around it, and we did an SB7. And that night was extremely creepy because I didn't realize my fellow investigator, Brandy, was a blood relative of the Dafoes. So I had a blood relative trying to communicate with what was ever attached. And then my girlfriend at the time, her father's a CO, and he was the one that used to watched him when he was up visiting Denimora. Sometimes they would transfer him around. He has been in Denimora before. Um, So it was just really unnerving. I didn't realize all this. And in the middle of the investigation, you actually see the whole laser grid go black, like something just walked right in front of it. And that was the only time that I've really had something affect me to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to get rid of this item. I blacked out right on. And it was funny, TikTok live, like people are like, oh, this guy's joking. I literally hit the floor. I was out. I woke up about 5 minutes later to Brandy, one of my investigators standing above me. She's like, I think you should get rid of that thing. I'm like, yeah, good call. So I'm very careful when I do investigations around things now. That's why I said at the beginning of all this, like it's a learning process. Your investigations will change over time. When I was younger, I was provoking. I was trying to be a big tough guy, and then I got my ass handed to me, by the spirit. So it's like you learn over time what to do, what not to do. Um, when you have something that has an attachment to an item, there is a possibility to have that transferred to you. So be very careful. I always usually, when I do an investigation, I usually wear tiger's eye or carry quartz. I pray. I always pray. I don't have any religious affiliation, but I do believe in the higher power. So that's something I do every time. And like I said, just be respectful. Everybody has a different way they go about stuff. Um, yeah. But yeah, a lot of this equipment, it's crazy. There's stuff that I used to watch on the TV shows, and now I'm like, oh, I get to play around with it like a kid at a candy shop. This is a REM pod actually, this is also a REM pod. So this is a proximity alarm. So if something comes near it, it will go off. It will light up. If that ever happens, run. But something people don't know is walkie-talkies can set off REM pods. So if my battery's not dead and I'm not going to look like a total tool right now, yeah, sweet.
I usually feel them, but.
So that should shut off in a second. Yeah. So, if you ever watch a ghost show, they have REM pods that have lights where they'll start lighting up around the circle. You'll be able to tell somebody's faking because when they hit their walkie-talkie like this, it's going to go like that. It's going to go all the way up. With REM pods, with the higher end ones, this is kind of a cheaper one. The closer you get, it will work up the light. But if it's just full, that just means somebody might be playing with a walkie-talkie next to it. Now, this is also REM pod, and this was made from a historic haunts of Waynesboro. They're right outside of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Their analogy on this is you come up and you tell something to touch a piece of equipment, and they may not know what it is. They might be like intimidated by it. It's almost like watching the movie Alien, saying, "Go up and touch that gun, see what happens." You don't want to. You're like, "Yeah." But if you have something that's recognizable, they might come up and touch that. So that's one piece that we've been using. And actually, when we did the research on the Underground Railroad, Caroline Bonaparte used to carry a lantern, and that was it was a signal of this is a safe place to land. Um, that was one of the other stories besides the Lady in White story. We got a story of lights on the water, floating down the river. These lights would come up and then they would just disappear. There was fishermen that were on the shore. They had those little lanterns that you pull open, and then when they did that, they were seeing lights floating towards them. So it was kind of I don't know if it was an intelligent or a residual, or maybe a bit of both. And that's another thing I never, I guess, mentioned. There's a couple different kinds of hauntings. You have poltergeist activity, which is when something moves an object. You have residual hauntings, in which it's almost like a tape recording of your life. Good example of this is I did a farmhouse out in Fort Covington. There was a guy they were waking up every morning about 4 a.m., just checking, making sure I'm not going over my time. We're good. About 4 a.m., he would hear boots going down the staircase. Front door would open, would shut, and it would be almost like every day. Then he realized it wasn't happening on Saturdays and Sundays. And he's like, that's weird. Like it's only happened Monday through Friday. Come to find out, the guy that lived there before them passed away upstairs in their bedroom, and he would have to be ready for work by 5 o'clock. And he would go downstairs at 4 o'clock, but he'd have his work boots next to his bed, and he'd walk down and he'd go out the door. So it wasn't an intelligent haunt; it was a residual. It was just him doing his normal routine every day he does. Um, so, but here I'm just going to change that camera so they can see me on there. Because I just realized I've been standing over here the whole time. Like I said, first public speaking. Then you have intelligent style hauntings, and those are when the entities can actually recognize that you're there. I think it's really powerful when you find out who a person is and you're doing this investigation, when you can become personal with them. And like we did with Caroline Bonaparte. And when we mentioned her name at the bridge, the activity started spiking. And I will tell you, that area is so extremely active, and there are positive feelings there. There's also negative. It's a weird vibe. And I think it's because it was not only a part of the Underground Railroad, but at one point was owned by the Native Americans here. And then you have a lot of things with French Indian War, the War of 1812. You have all these mixed emotions in this one area. And I think that causes activity to be spiked at sometimes. We've had rocks thrown from underneath the bridge. We had no idea how that was happening. I've had a rock hit my leg coming up right through the grate. We've had the bridge shake violently twice when we're on there. And at first, I thought it was an earthquake or Fort Drum testing with artillery, because we all know how that shakes your house. And I've checked, there was no earthquake, there was no testing at the artillery, so couldn't explain that. But I'd have to say the craziest thing we had, and it was episode 1, was the drum beats on the bridge. And something was hitting the bridge in a rhythmic beat, and we're still trying to find somebody who can identify what it is. But it's coming from underneath the bridge, and there's enough water down there that you wouldn't be able to stand down there and hit. It just doesn't make sense. And nobody'd be doing that at 5 degrees. I hope not. I mean, but yeah, a lot of crazy stuff's happened. So I appreciate you guys having me. And yeah, if you have any questions, come on up. I'm just gonna be sitting right here. So yep.
Where's the place you want to go to for your bucket list?
Ooh, that's a good question. Ireland.
Ireland?
I want to go to the castles.
There's a lot there.
Hellfire Caves. Hellfire Caves? So it's Hellfire Caves. I actually have some followers over in Ireland that have told me, they're like, hey, if you come out here, you can stay with us. And I'm like, I might take you up on that. Yeah, because that sounds good. The Hellfire Caves are a cave system that was under a church. So you have the representation of heaven and hell, and there was a secret society that would meet under in these caves, and they would do satanic worship. But it's now a museum. They want to teach about, how part of the town was going into church and the other part was going into the caves, and how it's like yin and yang kind of like thing, and it causes a lot of paranormal activity. So I was very interested, and I said, I'd like to go down there and do an investigation, and hopefully someday. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you. No, nothing. There's no such thing as a stupid question.
Have you ever seen a ghost that was up there?